Hello, hello, hello. We are here about to get started with the BurnBright Powerhouse Jam session. I am so excited that you are here with us. We are going to be getting this whole experience for the evening started. I have the pleasure of being joined by one of my most famous favorite people, Bob Gower, who has a number of different talents, but he will be introducing himself in the way that he feels comfortable, and then I'm going to actually officially open up the evening. But we like to start with the guest of honor, kind of sharing a little bit about themselves and just a message for the audience. So let's get started.
Sure. Hadn't prepared any thoughts exactly. So I'm Bob Gower, and my background is mostly in product development and design. I've done a lot of software work. I was also a newspaper designer for a long time as well, but I've always led creative teams, people who have to coordinate to do a lot, to do creative work, to do interesting work. And in recent years, I've pivoted, and now what I do is I train other people to do that. So I help teams operate more smoothly, operate more responsibly, and I've been doing that from a paradigm called Agile, which we're going to talk about some tonight. And I've come to believe that Agile is a really powerful way of viewing the world, and I actually use it in my personal life, which is maybe a little geeky and a little weird, but that's me, a little bit geeky, a little bit weird, and hopefully fairly effective as well. So.
Wonderful. That's a great introduction, Bob. So now I'm going to actually open up the session now that we have people joining in from all corners of the world. We invite you to introduce yourself, say hello, tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat box, and really start to engage in the conversation, because that's what this whole session is about. It's about being able to ask questions, get answers, and really apply the concepts and the ideas that Bob and I are going to be sharing this session into your life as well as your business. So let me officially introduce myself. My name is Ozioma of BurnBright, and I run a company called BurnBright International that focuses on helping individuals, businesses, and communities reach their full potential. Every month, I invite an expert to join me in what we call a powerhouse session. And a powerhouse session is really an opportunity for someone who really has a piece of knowledge, a piece of information that's really valuable to other people in their lives or in the world of their business, and bringing that knowledge to the forefront for the benefit of you, so that you can take these ideas and you can live a better life, run a better business, and really move forward in the direction of your dreams. And so the reason why I felt that this conversation around Agile is so important is because there's many concepts that exist within the world of business that can truly be applied to the world of small business, but also to our everyday lives. And so Agile is one of them. But first, before we dive right in, let's talk about the overall structure of the Powerhouse session. The way that it works is, as you see right there, people are starting to introduce themselves in the chat box, so we encourage that. Bob and I are going to be having a conversation, but it's not a regular conversation. It's actually one of the more interesting ones. We would probably call it edutainment. That means we're going to be asking each other a series of questions for the purpose of educating you, the purpose of entertaining you, the purpose of informing you. And so it's going to be a very informal chat that shares concepts and teaches as we go along. And then at the end of the session, we're going to open it up to you to ask your questions, and then we're going to be able to have even more dialogue. Without further ado, I am going to open up the session with a question for Bob. So Bob, what is Agile?
That's the question we could spend all day on. So Agile is essentially a philosophy of how to develop a complex system. So it comes out of the software world, so software is a classic complex system. About 12 years ago the term was coined, but it's been around longer. The practices have been around a lot longer. And essentially the idea is, how do we do this in a way that's collaborative, and how do we do it in a way that actually functions? Because when you're developing a complex system, just like when you're living your life, there's an awful lot of uncertainty around you. There's uncertainty in terms of your technical environment, there's uncertainty in terms of your team, and there's really uncertainty usually in even what the right thing to build is. So there's a sort of a tension between building the right thing and making sure that you're building it right. And so, again, about 12 or 13 years ago, a bunch of guys came together who had been experimenting with different methodologies, what we would call lightweight development methodologies. And they coined this term Agile, and they wrote something they called the Agile Manifesto. I really won't go into the manifesto now because I don't think it's hugely important, but I will say that a lot of their thinking comes out of something called lean manufacturing, or the Toyota production system. The reason that Toyota revolutionized the way automobiles were built and marketed back in the 70s and 80s is because they were building them in a very fundamentally different way. Not in terms of the engineering, though that was part of it, but actually in terms of how the people work together. So when we talk about Agile, we're talking about how people work together in order to build something. We're not talking about technology. We're not talking about bits. We're not talking about JavaScript or any of these languages. We're talking about how the people organize themselves and communicate, and it's revolutionary, and it's changing the face of American business or global business right now. Everybody is going Agile if you're building software right now.
It's really interesting that you say that, because when we think about the word agile, right, it's kind of this notion of being nimble, of moving your life and operating more quickly and easily. And I do believe that this concept called agile is something that many people don't really know much about, but they're starting to get a sense of it. And that's why I felt it was so important for us to do our due diligence and to share this concept and also the implications as it relates to your own life. I know for me, I had never even heard about Agile until a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I really was interested in what Agile could do if we actually think about our lives, because technology in our everyday lives are becoming more and more intertwined and fused together, and so we'll be getting into that conversation a little bit more, but I'll pass it on to you, Bob. Do you have any questions or a question that you'd like to ask me?
Well, I'm curious, like when you heard about Agile, well, actually, I'm wondering if you could give maybe your definition of Agile, or what it was that attracted you to it, because I feel like everybody has a slightly different perspective. My perspective is very industry heavy, but it seems like your perspective is a little more personal, and I'm curious about, like, I guess it's a two-part question, like how do you define it, but also what attracted you about it? And you can answer any or all parts of that appeal to you.
So when I think about Agile, definitely thinking about the technological realm, which is the way that I was introduced to it, but I think about it in terms of how do you actually run your life, live your life, move through life with a sense of more accountability, a sense of more authenticity, and also a sense of more of collaboration. And so the way that I came to Agile was really connecting with some of my friends in the user experience, the UX space, and they were really excited about this this concept called Agile and how it was going to allow them to be more effective and more productive and more accountable to how they went from idea to implementation. Now, whenever I hear anybody talk about how to make ideas happen or how to move things forward, I start to think to myself, well, every single day we have ideas, we have goals, we have dreams that we want to move forward. And why wouldn't we take the opportunity to learn about some of the latest methods in order to do that more effectively? I think that when we cross-pollinate and take ideas from one industry or from one other territory and apply it to another, that's truly when innovation happens. And so I was really interested in how do I live my life with more agility. So that's kind of, does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, and if you don't mind if I vamp on things a little.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Because I know we have a lot of questions, but we can get back to those too. But I mean, I think the word agile is sort of there's a I kind of dislike the word paradigm shift. Like there's a big change happening in the world, especially happening in the business world, where we need to be more agile. We need in agile what I would call little a agile, meaning the adjective agile rather than the description of the methodologies agile, but that we need to be more, the company that I work with now, we call it responsive. We need to actually be more dynamic, move faster, move in shorter iterations, build faster, get things into the customer's hands faster. And this is all driven by a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. What does the customer really want? all these different traditional industries are being disrupted now. The best performing automobile stock out there right now is Tesla, which is run by a software engineer, not somebody who comes from a traditional big iron background. So there are these sort of thinking and paradigm shifts happening, and I think it goes by many different names, right? It goes by Agile. Like I say, my company calls it responsiveness. My friend Jonathan Fields wrote a great book called Uncertainty a few years ago. If you even go into Stephen Pressfield's, right, what is it, the War of Art, right? So they talk about these methodologies for how do we deal with uncertainty. And that's really all we're talking about in some ways. How do we actually engage with it and admit that life is uncertainty and that our world is uncertain and still get stuff done? And I think that's kind of where I've always lived. How do I admit that I don't know what I'm doing half the time and then still be really effective in the world and get stuff done? And how do I help my customers do that?
Well, that's really interesting because I think that notion of uncertainty, but then also there's the other area of complexity. And I believe that Agile addresses both. There is the notion of, yes, life is uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't even know what's going to happen, an hour from now. But yet we still have to bring the full totality of our awareness, the full totality of our passion, our drive, our inquisitiveness, our desire to want to make the most of the moment. But then we also have to deal with the complexity, the fact that, especially as it relates to our lives and our goals and the things we're up to in the world, we can't really achieve all of it alone. Everything right now is so integrated, and our ability to achieve certain outcomes in our personal and our professional lives is so tied to someone else that we really need to learn to embrace all of that and come out on top. So my question for you, this is a little bit going off script, but how do we use Agile as it relates to building relationships in the world today? Because I think that the territory of relationships and how we go about creating collaborations is, to me, one of the most important frontiers that we're living in right now. Like, it's so important to get it right, because by bringing together the right partners, by collaborating on the right projects, and choosing the right mate, everything rests upon those choices and how you navigate that. So I'm really interested in what you think the Agile perspective or certain techniques that can be utilized in order to keep the integrity and the positivity and the collaboration going in our relationships.
Sure, that's a wonderful topic and something that's been really on my mind recently. I think it's Martin Fowler, who's one of the founders of or one of the people who created the Agile Manifesto, and he'd been developing teams for a long time. And one of the things he says is that smart people can learn to do just about anything from a technical standpoint. And so he wasn't so concerned, because usually what we do is we say, what kind of skill set do I need in order to do this particular job? So I'm going to go back to sort of product development, and then I'll talk probably more personally as well in a minute. But that we say, what kind of skill set do I need in order to do this job? And then we sort of look for the smartest person who's in that skill set. Now, I come from the newspaper background, and I don't know if you know about, if you have an image of newspaper editors, but they're all right. Newspaper editors are mostly jerks, at least in my experience. Like, they're very challenging people to work for, and writers and this prima donna. And so we, like the smart, and this happens in all industries, right? The smart people are difficult people. And I think what's happening is because we need to move so fast now, we actually need teams of people. And what we need to select teams of people that work well together and then get out of their way and let them work well together. But another piece of that is that our brains, I love that you use the word complexity, because I think, and complexity is a very deep conversation, obviously, what complexity science is and what we really mean when we say complexity. But one piece of our, when we look at our brains can't handle all that much information. And so most organizations try to write everything down, create these really strict procedures, these really hierarchical, military-like procedures. And what happens is those procedures break down if people don't use them. It's much better to organize things in a loose way. You give a team and say, here you go, here are all the resources. And if you look at the way, like, say, Twitter is organizing their teams right now, they give a team and actually Spotify is a wonderful example. They give a team, they say, this is your job, go improve this thing, and here's all the resources you need, and we're not going to distract you with anything else. This is your job, go do it. You're smart, we trust you, we'll get out of your way. And to me, that's what builds then you build that team, you build a good relationship, and if you have a lot of those teams, and then you have structures for bringing those teams together, then you can build a good organization. It's very, very, very different to the way we used to build organizations, which is, again, this sort of top-down, hierarchical way of doing things, which, frankly, is very fear-based. It's based on, do what I say, or I will fire you. Or do what I say, and I'll pay you more, right? And so the carrot stick, right? Either you get a sweeter carrot or a sharper stick. We're finding that that kind of motivation isn't good enough, or it's not fast enough, it's not agile enough, it's not nimble enough. It doesn't create organizations that are responsive enough in order to respond to the kinds of markets we find today. So that's in business. I do have other theories around. I think it also, weirdly enough, I use some of the agile techniques in my family as well. Do you want me to talk about that too?
Absolutely. That's what we want to dig into. How do you apply it into life as well?
You want an actual technique? Would you love to?
Absolutely. Want to hear techniques? I'm going to be sharing some as well, but we want to definitely get techniques that people can implement today.
So a really simple technique, and I really encourage you, and if we maybe I'll put it up in chat here, to check out something called personal Kanban.
Okay.
I don't see that. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the technology here. So.
I'll type it in.
But it's Jim Benson's work with personal Kanban. It's personalkanban.com. Kanban. Kanban is it's a word from Toyota Production System, but but I use it to manage my entire life, my entire day, which means that I'm only ever doing one thing at a time. So it's just a board. It's like what I call a Kanban board, and on what I call a Kanban board, what everybody calls a Kanban board. On one side, I'm going to mirror it here, there's all the things I need to do, and then there's the things I'm doing, then there's the things where I'm blocked on, and then there's the things that are done. And maybe there's some other states in there as well, but I limit the only amount of things. I can only be doing one thing at a time. So if I move something from my to-do list into my doing list, then I'm doing only that, and then when I move it over, I'm done. Now, there's an art to breaking things down and making them small enough, because I also have rules around how big things can be in that list. And then the other thing is that I always reprioritize all that stuff that I have to do. I'm always thinking about what's the most, and this is I think the question. So far it sounds like a to-do list, right? It just sounds like an average to-do list. But the real powerful question is, what's the most valuable thing that I can do right now? And we don't focus on what we call tasks, which are things that are just like what I would call activity. There's just something you can do, right? But I focus on action, or I focus on effectiveness. What actually moves the ball forward? And so we word and we think about things in terms of who our customer is. So I don't know, I kind of want to pull up my to-do list now, but if I were to look at things that I had to do today, they were things like, I had to write a job description for somebody today. So it's not just write a job description, but it's like it may be something small like outline the job description, because it moves the ball a little bit forward. But all of those little tasks roll up into the big thing, which is ship job description to my customer so they can deliver value, because it's always attached to some kind of truly valuable thing. It's maybe not the best example. I apologize. I don't have really good examples sitting here. But this idea of prioritizing things based on the value that they deliver. So in an organization, I do the feature which is going to deliver the highest value to the customer. I don't try to do all my features. I try to get something out the door this week that can deliver value to my customer. So I really want to get something in the customer's hands. So I have to get things out the door, and I do the highest value thing. So I can describe how I use it for my kid too, but we can go back to that in a minute.
Well, let's take that into something that's very important to me, the world of dreams, goals, and visions. I mean, I remember last year when I launched my first online academy, the Dream Runner Academy. It was really about how do you use Agile to help people run their lives and move forward and move in the direction of their dreams. The way we kind of took the idea of the personal Kanban or the Agile Scrum, and so for those who may not know, a Scrum is kind of like Some people do it every single day, a 15-minute stand-up meeting where you bring the teams together, and it's all about, you know, what needs to get done, what's currently being done, and wait, what is it? What do you need to do? What are you currently doing, and what needs to get done? And then you can also ask for help.
Yeah, and yeah, what's blocking you usually?
Exactly,
yeah, or if anything, hopefully nothing, but if something's blocking you.
Exactly. So the way that we were able, you know, I was able to, with my teams, to empower people to use that in the direction of their dreams, is we called it actually the Dream Run. So rather than a Scrum, it was called the Dream Run. And you would partner with someone and what I call create an inspired alliance. And in that process, every single week, you'd have a conversation with someone in the area of your dream. So here's an example. Let's say you have a dream of finishing a book, right? Almost every single person has a dream of writing a book, right? So you might say, okay, I'm going to create an inspired alliance, and I'm going to partner with, you know, my best friend Sue, and Sue and I are going to have a conversation 20 minutes every single week. And all I'm going to do is be held accountable to what did I do? Did I edit? Did I write a chapter? Did I interview someone? Did I take a photo for the book? You're just going to catalog what progress did you make. Then you're going to identify what action you need to take, and then you're going to move that, right? So you're going to identify what's been completed. You're going to identify what needs to be completed. And then if you know you have any blocks, you're going to identify the blocks as well. I find that that process alone, as it relates to how you run your life, if you take the time to create a partnership in an area that matters, and then chart your progress in a very real way, you will find you will be more productive. A lot of times we think in our personal lives that we're not getting done. Nothing's moving forward. But a lot of that is because we haven't put in place the accountability. And what I believe makes methods like Agile and Kanban so effective is because there is accountability being put in place. And so that's just one example of the way in which you can actually bring it into your everyday life, whether it's in your family or with a big goal or dream that you want to get accomplished. You really have to create a partnership, or if you don't want to create a partnership, do it on your own, but have some kind of repository, whether it's on Google Docs or if it's in a notebook or somewhere where you are identifying each week or each day what progress are you making towards coming to that point where you know that your dreams are truly taking flight. So I don't know, do you have anything to add about that in terms of how to use that in other ways on a personal level?
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, there's sort of two pieces there, which I like the accountability piece, I think of it both of as accountability, but also as collaboration, right? Like, as you said earlier, we don't tend to be able to really do things alone anymore, right? I think there may be, I watch my girlfriend who's an entrepreneur herself, running her own business, but she has a whole team of people around her all the time who are helping her kind of create what she's trying to create, even though she's essentially a solo brand and a solopreneur. And of course, as a family, right, we don't get to do things alone anymore. Like this, and I don't think we think we ever really could, but I think we used to build things based on this paradigm of aloneness, and so I think coming together on a regular basis and just checking in. What did I work on yesterday? What am I working on today? Am I blocked anywhere? Do I need any help? Just providing that visibility is much better than writing things down ever was. It's much better to depend on conversation than it is to depend upon email, because that's the other piece, right? Is that we do this live, hopefully over video, if we're not in the same location. But we don't do it in we do it. We act as a team and we meet. But the other piece, the other piece is, I think, that we also, you mentioned a book. So I have a book. I've got a stack of them up there that I wrote and I published about a year ago. And it was a struggle. It was very challenging, of course, as these things are. And I always came back to, well, what can I ship? Like, what's the thing that's going to push me towards my goal, my ultimate goal of having a book? What's valuable? And so, one week it was, one series of weeks it was get an outline. And then it was validate the outline, It was get an editor. It was get budget. I didn't have budget at the time to do it. It was all of these things, but it was it was taking these really big things that we have to do, right? We all have these big things we want to accomplish in life. and really breaking it down to what's the thing that I can do this week that's going to push me positively and really in a direction, and validate that, actually, hopefully even validate it with somebody else and get that accountability. I think this idea of taking big stuff and breaking it down, and again, not just into necessarily, like, I could have just started writing, I guess that's one way to go, but there were other things, but I had been writing for years. It was more like, oh, I actually have to, there's stuff around creating a book that I have to do. So I think it's, yeah, I think of it as kind of the rock crusher, right? I got these big things, how do I break it down into smaller and smaller and smaller rocks so I can actually digest them and do them? And not worry what's going to come 3 weeks from now, only worry what's going to come this week, right? Like, only keep my focus really, once I've broken it down, really focus on the next most valuable thing to do.
Well, you said the magic word, and we're going to get into some of the questions that people are starting to pose in the chat box. But focus, okay? Like, that's the beauty of when we talk about agile methods and we talk about these different techniques of Scrum or Kanban or all these different systems. The big key is that F word, focus. Without focus, you're not going to achieve anything in your business. You're not going to achieve anything in your life. And I think it's really important that any one of you who are listening right now, that you understand that, are you going to keep playing games or are you going to get in the game? And when you get in the game and you really get focused on what it is you're out to cause and the life that you are truly out to live, or the business that you're out to create, it really does call for you to identify what is your area of focus, what I like to always call the aim, right? Where are you aiming at? And what do you always need to keep in motion? So the AIM, always in motion. And in every single initiative that you decide to move forward with, you need to identify those success criteria. What are the things that I need to always keep in motion in order to move in the direction of my dreams? So I really wanted to take the moment to talk about focus. The other part, Richard had a question about structure, and his question is, how important is a very structured routine towards applying Agile to my life? For example, a check-in at a particular time of the day. Now, I have my own perspective about that, but I'll let you answer first, Bob, and then I'll give you my my philosophy on routines and rituals and structure.
Yeah. I think it's important, and it's important to know what the boundaries are. So one of the things that I do, I'd say almost every day, is I meditate for 10 minutes. And adopting that practice, I have meditated for years. I was, I used to go on big long retreats and things, but I never could keep a sustained practice. As a matter of fact, my life was rather chaotic in those days, because I was always swinging from one end to another. And what I found is, and this is just me, but 10 minutes works for me, but it's every day. It works when I do it every day because it provides a little bit of structure. Now I can do whatever else I want to at other times, right? So I meditate for 10 minutes, but then maybe some other parts of my day aren't heavily routinized. So what I think when we talk about Agile, we frequently talk about the cadence, or what we might call the heartbeat of our system. So we'll meet every day for 15 minutes, and then maybe every 2 weeks we'll meet to plan, and then we'll have some other meetings as well that are structured on a very, very specific cadence. But what happens at other times, we work out together. We just work out kind of in the moment. And we also work out rituals and routines for what happens when we get interrupted, because in a software world, systems go down, all of a sudden you've got something that you have to fix, or that's what we call a critical failure. And we all have those in our lives as well. So coming up with ways to deal with that, right? So something hits me, and I'm like, oh, shoot, okay, jump onto it immediately, take care of it. But before I go back to what I was doing before, I replan, I recommit, I reset my own expectations of myself, because I had set certain expectations. I was going to get so much done in a certain time period, but then I had something unexpected happen. So then I have ritual and routine for dealing with that. So I thrive on a little bit of chaos in my life, or a little bit of complexity in my life. But I also thrive on a lot of routine, and so really giving myself permission to have both of those things. And certainly with teams, I do that with teams. I get them on a cadence, I let them adjust the cadence and tweak it as they go, but not live in the moment. You know, like we will have a reflection period which is regular as well. So anyway, that's my perspective.
Perfect, perfect. And I think that, again, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be teasing out some of the elements that apply to Agile in the conversation we're having, because I know many of you may not know what Agile is or know the nuances of it. So when one key cornerstone of Agile philosophy or development is reassessment, right? Constantly assessing, right? And iterating, adjusting as you move forward with what you're developing, what you're creating.
Absolutely.
And I really do believe that too often in life, we don't take the time to do those postmortems after a relationship breaks down, after we potentially get fired from a job or decide to walk out of a job, or after we have a not so enjoyable conversation with a friend. Being able to always get into that space of reassessing what's working and what could be better. Again, not what's wrong, but what can be optimized.
Yeah.
You have to get into that process, and that's a way in which you can start to live your life with more agility, being able to bring more of those assessments into your everyday process. Another thing that I love is about rituals and routines. I'm very big on that, Richard. So having a time when you check in, I don't think it matters so much the time you check in, but that you stay committed to checking in each week. So sometimes, life happens. We're not always going to be able to be available at 2:15 on a Thursday. Things happen. But the question is, if you can't make that 2:15 with the partner you've created or whatever it is you decided to have your check-in, are you committed to making sure you make it that week? And too often, most people don't stay committed to that accountability. They say, oh, I missed that meeting. I'll do it next week, or I'll do it later. And then later becomes later, later becomes later, and then later becomes never. So in order to live with that agility that we're talking about, and to run businesses in that manner, you really need to have that constant reassessment. You definitely need to create rituals and routines, and you have to have a methodology that works for you. I'm very big on creating bespoke methods. The most recent one that I created is called DARE, and it has it stands for four different, choices or strategies that you can engage whenever you're either moving forward with a project in your life or in your business. So DARE. D stands for delegate. At some point when you're thinking about, something needs to get done in your personal life or in your professional life, you need to identify and say, wait a minute, should I be delegating this to someone else? Like you just mentioned with your girlfriend, she's a solopreneur, but there's a lot of things that she's delegating. Even in my own business, there's a lot of things that I know someone else is more effective at handling than I am. So I make sure that I don't spend the time getting, myself in a tizzy or wasting time. I immediately delegate it. The A stands for automate. There are certain things in your life that you're going to always have to do over and over again, whether that's, automating your emails with, if you're, email marketer in your business, or if it just means like being able to automate to the best ability that you can your laundry. Figuring out what are the actions that I need to take over and over again, and how do I create a system that is replicable, a system that kind of runs itself. The third piece is R in DARE. R stands for release. There are certain things in your life that you're just going to have to let go of. And you're going to have to say, you know what, when it comes to the way in which I want to live my life or run my business, I just need to release the responsibility and let it go. We're not going to go after that one. Sometimes you say, oh, this notion of low-hanging fruit, and everyone thinks that because the fruit is hanging low and you can grab it, that you should go after it. No! Low-hanging fruit is not always the best strategy for you to engage in as it relates to whether a business deal or a personal endeavor. You want to really be able to make a choice and say, is this something that's worth my time, or do I need to release it? And the final letter in that acronym is E, which is engage. There are certain things you're going to have to be able to delegate, some things you will automate, other things you will release, and finally, there are going to be things that only you can take control of. You have to fully engage yourself in it. And so I came up with that acronym, DARE, because I do believe people need to be more daring. They need to delegate more. They need to automate more. They need to release more. They need to engage more. So that's just an example of a strategy or a method that I created for myself and for my own clients that's really helping people muddle through this complexity and the uncertainty to try to figure out a way to maneuver and move more through life with agility. So that's just an example of my own little technique. What do you think of that, Bob?
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. I'm writing it down now too, to kind of so I remember. I'm very bad at delegating myself for the most part, but the others I'm pretty good at. Yeah, you really got me thinking about, and actually I think I may disagree with not with your framework. Your framework's great, but it was something you said earlier about the meeting. Like, do you have? I can't remember the word you used, whether it was commitment or, yeah, are you committed to doing that meeting even if you can't make it at that specific time? And I agree. We need commitment in life, but I just recently read a book that kind of pulled a lot of stuff together for me. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a book called Willpower by Roy Baumeister. Have you come across this? It's wonderful. Anyway, read it, everybody. Read it, Willpower. But anyway, what they basically say is, and there's a lot of people who have been talking about this for years. This is a man who did a lot of the original research on this, but that the part of our brain that makes decisions and the part of our brain that sticks to things, willpower, is the same part of our brain. So the more decisions you have to make, the less willpower you're going to have. So there's a real power to creating habits and routines because they allow us to take that part of our brain. We don't have to make a decision about it anymore, right? So if you're trying to lose weight or exercise, one of the most powerful things you can do is to develop a habit. Like for me, I meditate first thing when I wake up in the morning. So I have a trigger, which is wake up in the morning, and then I have a habit, which is meditate, right? So, and if I don't meditate first thing in the morning, like if my stepson is doing something crazy and I have to go, if he's up early for some reason and I have to deal with him or something, if I miss it, I often miss it for the day because that habit has fallen out, because it's going to now require me to use the brain that I was going to use for work that day in order to get myself to sit down and make that decision to sit down and meditate. So I believe really in developing routine, as you said, routines and rituals and habits around things. But we also need to make them the minimum required thing, just so we have stuff left over to do other things. And I've gotten really good. It's actually funny. We read this book. My girlfriend read the book. I read the book. And we talk about it a lot around the house now, and we realize there are moments when you can just feel your brain not able to engage anymore. Oh, I'm just not able. And I'm just oh, okay. So the most productive thing I can do right now is eat something, something healthy, hopefully, or just not try to do any stuff anymore. Learning, she just actually had to cancel a workshop she was going to teach this coming weekend. And she's like, we talk about this today. She's got some stuff going on in her life right now that's a little challenging. And she's like, I really got that the way I take care of my customer the best now is to take care of myself. And I think, working at this, one of our values, and going back to Agile now, one of the values in the Agile Manifesto, or one of the principles in the Agile Manifesto, is that we work at a sustainable pace. We don't burn ourselves out. And I think, and part of doing really good work, if you're serious about doing excellent work in the world, you can pull an occasional all-nighter. That's fine. But if you're pulling all-nighters as a regular course in the course of your business, something is wrong, and you're not doing the best quality work you can be. Therefore, you're not serving your customer the best you can. You're not serving the people that are valuable to you the best you can. And you really need to take a look at that. And I find I frequently act as that voice. I'm getting older now, so I'm hopefully a little bit wiser and a little bit lazier. It's funny how those two go together sometimes. But I'm the voice for let's slow down and let's really decide what's important, and then let's knock that thing out of the park. I'm sorry I keep coming back to this prioritization thing, but it's just so huge for me. Let's knock that one thing out of the park, and that other thing may be a great idea over there. But I can't do this one and this one, so I have to choose. I have to choose which one I'm going to focus on, and then I have to do that.
No, I agree. And just coming back to just to clarify about the conversation we were having before, it wasn't that I was saying not to create a ritual around the meetings. It's more so about, are you committed to having a meeting?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, as we all know, like for instance, tomorrow I had a meeting before I go up to the Catskills at 10 o'clock, and it got canceled. Now I have to say, am I committed to this meeting? And I am, so I have to immediately at that point reschedule it.
Got
That's
it.
like a different point. But I agree with you in terms of the way in which our brains operate. There's also another book that goes with willpower called An Act of Will by Roberto Asaglio. He comes from the world, he's one of the founders of this concept called psychosynthesis, which goes back to the 60s and 70s, and is all about the way in which we bring ourselves into being one whole being. So what I love is when people talk about will and willpower, and a lot of this conversation comes from a previous time, and we can go back, centuries into this conversation about how do we show up and enact our will, right? Our power, our internal reservoir to make, reserve to make choices, and how do we actually stay focused? I love what you said about prioritization, because I think that, that notion within the world of Agile about working at a sustainable pace, and the way in which in our lives and also in our businesses, sometimes we think that we have to do everything and that we have to do it all. We look at, the way in which someone's built their own business or their brand, their personal brand, and they're all on these platforms, and we're thinking we have to do the same. No. Figure out what are the essential core success criteria for you, prioritize that, identify actions that you need to take in order to achieve those aims, and then go full steam ahead. I am a big, big, big proponent of success criteria, because that's, to me, is how we create brilliance in our life, right? When you think about someone being brilliant, you're not saying, oh my God, that person is brilliant, they're doing everything. You're like, no, that person is killing it in that area. So what is that brilliance that you have inside of you? What brilliance are you trying to bring forth through your business? You have to ask those kinds of questions, and then you need to get real and focused and prioritize the actions that are going to help you unleash and truly, truly, truly emanate from that sense of brilliance in your personal life, and also in your business if you're intending to start one, or if you're currently running one.
Yeah. Wow, you just brought up something for me, an old memory for me, which was, because I'm so much about prioritization, so much about like what's that most important thing. But then the question is, okay, how do you decide? And I love what you said about don't go after the low-hanging fruit, because the low-hanging fruit often is not that valuable. Also, don't go after the squeaky wheel, to stick with metaphors. But like, that thing that's bugging you, or that someone's bugging you about, may not be the most valuable thing. So having a methodology, having a process, having a way to really decide and then stick to your guns is really important. I used to be a designer, and we always say good design is about saying no. It's not about saying yes to every idea. It's about saying no, and to almost all the ideas. Coco Chanel, right? She said, you get dressed for the evening, and then you look at yourself in the mirror, and then you take one item off because you probably put on too many accessories, right? That simplicity being this art of doing the good thing. So a few years ago, actually, when I kind of discovered Agile, I was going through a rather tough time personally, and I had this moment of realization, which I think is what every good product person realizes as well, is that you don't really know anything. Like, I had this realization that I didn't really know what was valuable, what that special thing was about me. Like, I'd been trying to articulate it my whole life and saying, I'm the best at X, and then you go off and try to do it, and then for whatever reason it didn't work, and then I'd blame myself, and I went through all these cycles with this, and finally I just kind of gave up. I was like, I don't know. I said, I'm just going to do what people ask me to do. Like, I'm just going to pay attention to what the world is asking from me. And so I called this following the yes, right? Following whatever the world is really asking for me. And I said, when the world asks me or something, I'm going to do that thing really hard. Like, I'm going to do that as if it's the most important thing imaginable for me, rather than put my own mind and my own will into it. And what happened, I think, is that I discovered a lot more about how I was valuable in the world. And it's always a give and take, right? Sometimes you have to put yourself forward and not. So in developing products, we test them with customers. We give them to the customer and say, do you like this? And we don't plan it for an entire year, build it for an entire year, and then say, here it is. We build a little piece and say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? It's this constant level of iteration. Richard, I saw your question about how software can be applied to your life, that lives and relationships are perhaps less so. I'd say, perhaps, I mean, relationships in my life have been somewhat mutable in a lot of ways. But I know that we all have commitments. I mean, and I'm not saying that we don't exist inside of our frameworks of what we are committed to. You know, and certainly if we have responsibilities and commitments, absolutely. But then again, that becomes the framework, and within that framework, we then operate and then try to find that yes.
I think that's just beautiful in terms of, you know, what are you being asked, right? What are people coming to you for? And I think a lot of people, especially when they think about how do they move forward with their lives, I always get this question often, you know, with the work that I do in coaching and strategic consulting, you know, how do I develop my expertise? Well, first it starts with noticing, you know, and that's what I do love about Agile is that there is an awareness, right? In order, Abraham Maslow, who I love, you know, came up with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all these other philosophies around, you know, that predate this notion of flow. He talks a lot about in order to change someone, you have to first change their awareness of themselves. If you want to live a more agile life, or if you want to run your business with more agility, you have to start to pay attention to what is working. In the same way, you have to pay attention to what are people asking of you? What kinds of requests are being made? What is seeking to come forth through you? Because I truly believe that all of us are kind of like we're vessels, right? We are constantly giving off energy. We're constantly making these choices and these decisions. You know, we're not doing more often than not, we're not doing it alone, right? Yeah. So when you start to pay attention to that and you start to say, well, if I really want to get good at this, I have to pay attention. I have to be more iterative, like change, what that means, that some people don't know what iterative is, but it's really about quickly adapting and shifting and changing things according to, you know, how they arise. So it's kind of like constantly iterate, make the changes necessary and keep moving forward. Now imagine if you have a goal for yourself and you start to see that it's not working. What do? Most people still stay on the task. And they should be shifting or really looking and digging in and saying, do we need a different strategy here?
Yeah.
Do we need a different approach? I mean, let me ask you, Bob, was there a time in your life where Agile, right, or this notion of being more fluid and flexible with how you rolled, you weren't about it. You were staying committed to the wrong path, so to speak. I would love for you to share that with the audience.
Well, there's the if for those of you that are investors or know your economics, the sunk cost problem, right? That it's most of us. There's so many interlocking things here. I don't know exactly what to tackle first, but this idea that we're going to keep Kitty. That's Sue, by the way. That's Kitty Sue, the boy named Sue. That we're going to keep doing whatever it is we were doing because because people will hold on to a stock until they recover their money. And really what you have to do is you have to invest. You have to ask yourself, given what this stock is worth today, would I invest the money that it's worth in that stock? Because anything that you've already lost is unrecoverable. It's lost. It's in the past. And I think as people, we start working on a project or we invest in a relationship, and then we're like, well, wait a minute, is this really the place to invest my time, my energy, my attention? And I think that speaks directly to what you really talked about there, which is change, right? Which is how we change, how we choose to change. And I just want to address that really briefly because it's a real passion of mine. Humans were very good at rationalization, right? There's really good evolutionary reasons for this, right? That if you have a cognitive problem, the easiest way to solve, the lowest energy way to solve that problem is to change the way you think about it. So let's say, there's something out there in the environment, like I have this perception of how my life should be, but then there's data about how my life actually is. It's easy for me to just sort of rationalize and say, well, oh, this is what I deserve. This is what I'm worth. This is just the way things are. I can't do anything anyway. I see this happen in organizations all the time that hire me to change them. They do the equivalent of that. The most expensive thing you can do, the most risky thing you can do personally, evolutionarily, is to actually try something different, to really do something different. Because as you do new things, you become a new person. You actually experience the world in a different way. And that's risky. You actually have to let go of some old part of yourself. And so usually we have to have a crisis if we're going to really change. If we're going to really change direction, we have to have some kind of crisis. But most of the times we have a crisis, we will rationalize away that crisis and accept it and live inside of it rather than make a real change.
No, I
did
love
I go too wide ranging there? I hope I didn't go
No. I think you raise a lot of points that are really important, because that's what's at the heart of Agile, right? Is the willingness to adapt, the willingness to take risks, and to assess whether or not it's working, and then change if needs be. So imagine, for those who are watching now, that you actually developed a habit of being willing to change. How amazing would that be? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is some people just don't want to change. They've held on. They have too much invested. Yeah. But the truth is that if you really are out to, unleash that brilliance, live that life, rock that business, you have to be willing to take risks, and you have to be willing to change. We read all the time about entrepreneurs like Richard Branson and all these other people. And it really does come down to the willingness to take risks. Like, even a Mother Teresa, I have Mother Teresa's stuff hanging on my wall. Like, she came, I believe she was from Eastern Europe, and she ended up in India. Mother Teresa is not an Indian woman, people. She took a big risk to go out there and leave the convent and go out into the world and serve. The reason why it's relevant is I'm, planning this trip that I'm taking to India for 6 weeks. But I really think about that. The people who are willing to take those big risks are the ones who really get the reward. So I think that one of the biggest things we can learn from Agile is that we need to be willing to take risks and adapt to the risks that we're taking, and to assess and to constantly break things down into manageable, I want to say manageable risks, but let's say you have this big risk in front of you, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to take it, and then you decide to take the plunge. Once that choice is made, then the question is, what are those manageable pieces and actions I need to take in order to keep that transformation going? Because we don't want to stagnate, right? We don't want to run into a situation where we're like, okay, I've taken the risk. Well, that's enough. I quit my job, didn't I? No, you quit your job. What are you going to do now? Right. So people need to realize that one risk is not enough, right? The risk there's also the actions that need to be taken to actually ensure that the reason why you took that risk, that desired outcome, is actually being achieved. So, do you want to build on that while I read the next question?
Well, actually, the next question figures into that, which was Richard's question about Eric Ries.
Yeah, read it, please.
Yeah, so Eric, I love that you bring up Eric Ries and sort of the distinction between what the world asks of you and what the world actually wants, because we know that people often say they want one thing and don't actually want that thing. And I think the distinction that Ries makes in the Lean Startup is that you actually have to get someone to pay for something. You actually have to get someone to buy something. And being somebody who has been an entrepreneur, who knows a lot of entrepreneurs, I've failed at entrepreneurial efforts. I've succeeded at them. I've done a lot of different things, and I've watched people quit their job. Just what you were just saying, Ozzy. So they quit their job, and then they're like, I'm going to go live my dream because I decided that I am the world's greatest. I don't know, like that. The world needs X from me. I figured that out. I went on a vision quest. I took a trip to Peru, and now I know what the world needs from me, and I'm going to quit my job. And then they live in poverty for the next 10 years, right? I've watched this, and nothing wrong with poverty. I lived in poverty. I don't mean to shame anybody for not having money. I think, but I've also done this. I'm not just going to be personally. I have failed to pay attention to what the world is actually willing to buy from me. To really, and I'm using buy in a very literal sense, which is money. But there's buy in other ways as well. Like, I've also stuck in relationships with people who say they're like, well, I don't know if I want a relationship. I'm like, I want a relationship. And like, you sort of stick around. They're not willing to buy. They're not willing to commit. They're not willing to say. They're not willing to give something of themselves, right? And when Ries, when he talks about buy, he says three things. Either they're going to trade something scarce, time. They're going to trade information, or they're going to trade money with you for what you've got. So if you're trying to test a product and whether the product is actually valuable or not, you have to develop some means. You have to get them to give this, we're going to go back to email marketing now, but give you their email address, give them, give you their sex or their name or some piece of information about you. Are they willing to take a test or take a survey, give you of their time and information in order to get a sample of the product, or are they willing to actually part with cash, being my favorite, which is cash. But I think sometimes we have to take a step back from our lives, take a step back from our businesses and say, are people, by their behavior, demonstrating that what I have is valuable? Or are they simply mouthing the words, and I'm willfully blind to their behavior because I really desperately want to believe what they're saying? And I think this shows up in all aspects of our life. And I think, but I think it shows up, it shows up everywhere. Not especially any one where.
I'm going to even take that one step further, because I believe that, and I love that question, Richard, that we ask a lot in terms of what people are asking of us. But what are you asking of yourself? Are you demonstrating that you are a person of value? And I think that starts the first conversation, because, so within, so without. So if we're not actually demonstrating that we value ourselves and that we value our time and our information and our finances, then how can we really expect anyone else to do the same?
Yeah.
So when it comes to, and that's, again, I keep going back to the main through line here because we only have a couple of minutes left, but part of the beauty of Agile and the reason why I felt so committed and so passionate about bringing some of these concepts out today in this jam with you, Bob, is that it starts from how you are choosing to take those principles and make them real in your own life, so that then you can bring forth what it is that you are truly out to cause in the world.
Yeah.
Because we can sit there and say, well, what is the world asking of me? But first we have to say to ourselves, well, who am I committed to being in this world? And then if I'm truly committed to being that, how does who I'm being and what I'm doing sync up with what people need and are willing to pay for? And you're absolutely right. It does. The rubber meets the road when it comes to, being able to survive and thrive, right?
Yeah.
How do I actually make a living as a result of my passion? But I will say this, that regardless of what you believe you're going to make a living at, if you don't start with creating some structure, a certain degree of accountability, or at least partnering with people who have it, you won't get very far. Because, I myself have been, working in that space of entrepreneurship, and it is not easy, but it is one of the most powerful, dynamic, transformational processes that you can undertake, becoming an entrepreneur, and also becoming a better person. Like, I believe entrepreneurship is not just about, how much money you're making. I believe that there's a part of the notion of being an entrepreneur that's really about how you show up. And those who can really dig in and use that as a method for, internal as well as external transformation, are the ones who really enjoy the entire journey. Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Jonathan talks about. I love this quote from him. He said I'm no longer interested in product market fit, which is usually the holy grail for entrepreneurs, like getting that product to fit the market. He says I'm interested in product maker fit. Like, I only want to make products that fit me, that fit my lifestyle. Now, part of that is having products that throw off enough cash to actually take care of the things that you care about, and part of that is also how much time and energy they take. But are you committed to what you believe in, and are you committed? Are you putting all of your attention where it needs to go? And I think the other piece is, are you paying attention to what you're hearing? Are you listening? I think you talked about that before. Like, are you? And I think fundamentally, when it comes to product development in an Agile world, we talk about, are you listening to the market? Are you really paying attention to what people are saying?
I agree. I couldn't agree more. So with that, we have some key points that we want to make before we wrap up. We're at the, almost at the top of the hour. So are there any final words or any final statements or ideas that you want to leave our guests, our audience, this session with? Like, any core concepts that they need to get as it relates to applying Agile in their lives and also in their businesses?
I think, I came in with a couple of thoughts, and I think there are two things I like to juxtapose. One is, I mentioned before, which is, activity and action. Make sure that you're not just filling your day with activity, but that those activities are actually leading towards some outcome in the world, some kind of action. The other thing I see people do, I see myself do, is that it's very easy to focus on efficiency, like I want to do things the fastest and easiest and simplest way, but that may not be the most effective. Again, kind of going back to, are we really creating the outcomes inside the world? And like, I love to do, well, there's a great quote from a chef. He's like, we do things the right way around here, which means the slow, stupid way. Like I like people that take time with my food. I like people that take time, to really do things right, to put some craftsmanship and some artistry behind it. But again, all of that goes back to the F word, as you said, which is to focus. And I would say if there's something you can get rid of in your life, get rid of it. That we have to kill things which seem like really great ideas sometimes, and really make the hard decisions, really face those hard decisions and choose.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob. And for me, I would say that every single day you have the opportunity to move in the direction of your dreams. You have the opportunity to take a passion point that lives inside of you and just one step further, make something happen with it. And the way that you ensure that that happens is by figuring out what are the systems and the structures that you need to put in place in your life in order to make that happen, in your business in order to make that happen. Every single life and every single business runs according to some kind of framework. The challenge is that many of us aren't even aware that there's some system, a process running your system.
Yeah.
Now, what I want for you is to become more aware of what is driving your system and to empower yourself by making some conscious choices around what you desire to empower the process of your own transformation and your own growth. So it may not be Agile. It may be something else. But this session was really about exposing you to some core concepts of focus, accountability, being more iterative, reassessing often. Different core concepts that will empower you to move your life and your business forward. And I hope that you took the time to write down some notes. If you haven't, you can always watch in the replay. But I look forward to the next Powerhouse session. I hope you enjoyed this just as much as I did. Thank you so much, Bob, for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful. Really, really grateful.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Until next time, may your inner light burn bright. May you create brilliance out in the world with all of your projects. And I look forward to hearing about them on Facebook as well as through the different channels that we have on Twitter and also on Pinterest and Instagram. So until then, I'm Ozioma of BurnBright, joined with Bob Gower, and we'll be seeing you soon. Take care.